This is Z1035 and Blake Frazier back with What's Up in Smith County. We're joined by Dr. Michael Robinson, Superintendent of Smith County Schools. And over the last few days, we have invited concerned citizens to submit questions anonymously through our Z1035 website. We were quite overwhelmed with the response, and for the sake of time, we found a common thread among the questions and have picked out a few of the questions along that same theme. We continue now. This person expresses concern over the budget cuts. The question reads, I am a lifelong resident of Smith County, and 3 of my children are currently in the Smith County school system. The budget cuts that are being implemented against the custodial staff along with the teaching staff, which is a pay cut, my question is, are there any cuts being planned for the overstaffed school board and ex-principals? Is anyone there, including you, Dr. Robinson, willing to take the same cuts as other people are being asked to take? I think they should lead by example and start at the top rather than the bottom. In closing, educators have a responsibility when they affect so many students' lives. They should have a passion for what they do rather than being there just to receive a paycheck. I have been fortunate enough to know some of these people. Now I'll let you respond.
At this point, Blake, we haven't made any cuts across the board. When we do, or if we do, and hopefully we won't have to do that, but if we were to do that, the cuts again would come across everybody, including myself. Having that 3% cut or 2% or whatever it would be, if it were to come to happen, would need to apply to folks like myself as well. And I think that's the only fair way to do it. At this point, we haven't done an across the board cuts. We have only worked on extended contracts, days beyond 200, and overtime hours, if there are any. Those are small pockets of cost in the school division, but at the same time we felt like those need to be addressed before we started impacting other staff members. And it's something that we've tried to do through attrition on overtime and extended days, but this year, because of the severity of the budget cuts, we've had to kind of move that up and apply it to people that are currently employed, and we didn't want to do that, but we're not left with much choice when Richmond sends you $5 million less at a minimum for operations next year. I think it's important for folks to know, too, that 83%, and after the cuts, about 84% of our budget is going to wind up being in personnel. So whenever the state does make those type of decreases to our revenue, that's the only place really we have to go. We can cut back, but you still got to heat the buildings, and you got to put gas in the buses, and there are instructional supplies that have to be purchased, and programs that we run that are great for kids that have to be funded. And from there, and again, that's a small percentage-wise a portion of our budget, where personnel is a huge percentage part. And if we can avoid anything that has to do with cuts to our staff, that's what we want to do. But at the same time, there's a fiscal reality to what we're dealing with right now, and there's some hard decisions having to be made.
During the last administration, under the leadership of Jim Sullivan, a change in the salary scale for Smith County was implemented. Although some were affected in a very positive way, others felt that it wasn't a good deal for the more experienced teaching staff. This person's question is based on that event. I would like to know if those $4,000 to $6,000 raises that only certain teachers received several years ago should be the first ones cut in pay instead of everyone's pay cut, so those certain teachers can still receive their higher pay. It just doesn't seem fair.
You're right, Blake. That decision happened, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago. Many folks, not just because they got that salary increase, find this to be a much fairer scale that we have now than we did at the time, that it was a more equitable scale. That 1 year was tough because there was a discrepancy in the amount of raises different folks got, but it's the only way you can sometimes straighten the scale back out is to do that inequity. But hopefully you recover from that and start doing it more equitably from there forward. And I think through Mr. Sullivan's administration, after doing that, as well as through the time I've been here, that's what's happened. We've tried to be fair in how we go about doing it. I personally think that it was the right move to make when you look at it from the perspective of doing a scale that would help Smith County schools continue to be competitive in our region of the state to attract teachers into the school division. One of the things that we're proud of is that we try to get teachers closer to the top faster. Obviously, the budget cuts are having some impact on that at this point, but give them a chance to have lifetime earnings that would be competitive in Southwest Virginia. Somebody else may have a higher starting salary, but if you stay with us in Smith County and you wind up going all the way through retirement, you have the chance on your lifetime earnings to be pretty competitive in this region of the state. It's not a real fair comparison to look at other parts of the state when we talk about that kind of stuff. But it is my hope to minimize anything that has to do with anything that has to do with across the board issues, and I don't think changing the salary scale to what it was 7 years ago is a good idea.
Next couple of questions deal with job cuts. When will the decision be made whether or not positions have to be cut? And when will those who are going to be cut be notified? Knowing ahead of time would be helpful if we are going to need to begin looking for employment elsewhere. Thanks for your time.
Once we get final revenue figures from the state and from the locality, I think at that point we'll know whether it has to be done. Richmond, the legislators, or what they call the budget conferees, are now working through the budget with the hope of finishing it by next Friday, which is, I think, March the 13th or somewhere in that time frame. And it is our hope that they'll come to the aid of public schools and the cuts won't be as bad and we won't have to do that. So I think as soon as we are to know where the state and local revenue falls, we can make those decisions fairly quickly and notify folks if it is going to happen.
And this question deals with if that happens. What does the Smith County School Board plan to do to help the support staff and teachers who lose their jobs due to budget cuts, do to find new jobs and further their education to return to the competitive workforce?
We don't have any formal programs for that. I think there are programs through the state, through workforce development and other agencies that can help that. If an employee gets in that situation.
Mike, it's been a tough round of questions. We're almost done. And again, I want to thank you for your eagerness to meet with me to answer the hard questions. When we return, school programs are the issue. What's Up in Smith County with School Superintendent Dr. Michael Robinson will continue in just a moment. Thanks for listening to Z1035.